This evening I thought I would talk about different aspects of retreat, in any practice form actually, but the two that I want to focus on are, one is strict solitary retreat, which is taught more in the Tibetan lineages than in, say, in Zen or Japanese or Chinese forms. So besides our daily practice of coming to the cushion each day for whatever you're doing, an hour, half an hour, 45 minutes, 40 minutes, maybe morning and night, doing as much as you can. It seems to be necessary once in a while, say once a year, maybe a couple times a year, to go in to retreat and really emphasize that sitting practice, to ramp it up and sit for longer periods. Here at Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, the actual structure here is one of an ongoing retreat. You'd call it a group retreat. We call it a practice residency, which if you were to come here and live, which you could make application to do that. You would pay a tuition and you would be required to sit 6.5 hours a day of sitting meditation, shikantaza, and maybe some other practices, but generally that would be the general practice that you would do. And so that would be what would be considered a group practice, because you'd be with a group of people. You would be practicing every day at the temple. In the zendo, you'd be practicing in the eight or so hours of scheduled study that we hold every day at noon, or Saturday at 11 o'clock, Monday and Tuesday evenings at 8 o'clock, and again Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock, 3:30, thereabouts. So in this way, you would be talking to other people, Sangha, other people who are practicing, studying the same thing that you are, and engaging with them around the material. Samdi Nirmochana Sutra, Lankavatara Sutra, the works of Dogen Zenji, his Shobogenzo, and we haven't gotten into his extensive record yet, but that will probably happen at some point. And also the works of writings of Dan Lusthaus, and we've also studied, for over a year I think we studied Progressive Stages of Meditation on Emptiness by Khenpo Sultram Jamso. And then before, or not too long ago also, we studied the works of the 14th century Tibetan Mahasiddha Longchenpa. So studying this material and discussing this material with others is very, very powerful to heighten the practice of the three jewels, in particular the last of the three jewels, or Sangha, or community, a group of people who are all intent upon understanding this ancient spiritual path, this teaching. Very, very powerful thing to do. Takes a while to see that, because initially it can be quite aggravating. And then I come in as the teacher here, abbot, head teacher, guiding teacher, whatever name you want to give it. Their names. Old guy who's been doing this a long time. I come in for the last 15, 20 minutes, and at the end of each of those practice sessions, and discuss with the people who are studying on their own in the community. I respond to questions, sometimes even answer a few of them. So this seems to be a pretty good mix, a way of bringing you into a really strong 6.5 hours a day is quite a bit. People who live here because they need to pay tuition may only sit 4 hours, 3, 4, 5 hours a day because they may have a job or some work that they have to do the rest of the time. But usually someone who comes here to practice in that way is pretty serious in intent. They don't come here just to not practice or to find ways to get out of that protocol. And sometimes someone asks, or if they seem to have a need, sometimes we combine the group situation with what's called strict solitary retreat, which is the other kind. So sometimes we do a little bit of this, maybe the morning, or the person's totally by themselves, the afternoon is with others. I don't recommend that. If somebody has to really ask about that, I recommend doing one or the other. The other form, strict solitary retreat, is when you go into retreat, you say bye-bye to your friends, your pets, your job, your bill collectors, your computer, your smartphone. Though you may have a smartphone with you, or might have your phone with you, so in case you need to contact someone. So, and you're in the monastery, so that we have one space in particular set aside, a small studio apartment set aside just for someone to come in and do long-term practice by themselves. I think the longest anyone has practiced here has been for a month by themselves. So you go into that situation, take all your food. It may happen where you don't see anyone at all for 10 days or a week or 2 weeks. More than likely 10 days than a week. Maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, maybe a month. And you would be totally by yourself, and then you would do whatever practice was set up for you, whatever you decided, possibly yourself, but also maybe discussing with me something that would work for you personally. Quite often I say to people, depending on my connection, but generally speaking, I say to people, if you come here and practice here, you have to be a student of mine for at least while you're here. You can leave, you can go back to having the Dalai Lama be or some famous teacher. But while you're here, you would function as a student of mine. So some people really need to spend time doing practice residency because they really don't want to be with other people. They'd rather be solely by themselves. And so maybe that they should practice more interacting with others and rubbing up against that kind of situation in community, and at the same time doing an intense awareness practice. A lot of opportunity for catalysts to come into the milieu of your mind and mix it up in such a way that it's more difficult for you to shut down on that which you need to see, to fluff up that which you need to allow to lay still, or to fight with something, or get rid of something that would also like to continue breathing. The other aspect of practice residency here at Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery is that you would be learning to do forms, the form of the Doan, who leads the chant leader, the form of the Doshi, who is the one who comes up and does the prostrations and makes offerings to the altar, to the Buddha, and to the three jewels on behalf of other people who are here. These forms are very important. Be very careful not to make assumptions about what these forms are. Chanting the sutras, following the various forms of bowing, doing prostrations, and so on. They're very important, difficult to put into words. Jada.
You said you don't recommend doing like half solitary, half practice residency. Why is that?
I have had people do that before, if they want it or insist on it. Seems to be not too many, but a few. It seems to be that when I talk to someone, I know which one they should be doing if I talk to them a little while. I know that they need to be in solitary retreat. Or I know that they'd be better doing practice residency because it causes them to constantly engage with others. You know, there's a kind of a division that we arbitrarily use, introvert, extrovert, and so on like that. And though I'm not in favor of that particular set of concepts, there is something to that in that some people really like to be out talking and visiting and hanging out with others and don't really want to be alone very much. Other people really would prefer to just be by themselves, spend more time by themselves. They feel quite content being by themselves. So a little bit easier for that person maybe to do a solitary retreat. There in our practice, or in strict solitary retreat, there's no one to talk to, so the silence there is quite natural. You're just naturally silent unless you're talking to yourself, which you may have to do. Chanting mantras is like talking to yourself. And when you're so that's the silent part of it is natural. There's no one there. So when we come out and mix it up with others, practice with others, I don't, here at this place, we don't have silence. We don't, I mean, it's not that you can't just not talk to people, but we don't do that as a form. And I did that as a form for 30 years. Practiced that because that's the way it was set up. But having looked at that for a long period of time, we don't set that up here as a form because it isn't that helpful. It just causes the people who are basically more gregarious or more extroverted to have more difficulty because they're around people, they're used to talking, and the people who are let's say, better at being quiet, but not talking. There tends to be a tendency to kind of have a kind of pride over being quiet. Kind of, and sometimes these people will even lecture other people or shake their finger at them and tell them to shh, silent retreat. So, not particularly helpful to do that. People one-upping one another. And this isn't something I thought about. This is something I watched for 3 decades, close to it. And It's not a matter of disagreeing with that. I would say that if you're a teacher or you're teaching a learning situation that says silent retreat, then that's probably something you need to do. You should just continue to do it. We're not saying we're right and everyone else is wrong. So also, I think that it's necessary to respond to Chazon's question about the half and half, or mixing it up, or customizing, or having a hybrid kind of retreat. I think it would be better to if you have a teacher, to work with what he or she recommends based on why have someone to teach unless you're going to always decide everything you're going to do. I think this is some reason why in ancient times, and even up till now, the protocol for something is just laid out. This is how it's done, this is how we do it, and everybody's going to do it that way. And there's something to be said for that. But there's also something to be said for looking at someone, talking to someone, working with a student working with a teacher, and having that teacher make a recommendation on what they think would be a good practice for you. I've told people what I think they should do, and they've said thank you very much, and they've gone about their business. So it's not like it's some kind of order or shoka.
You have a background with both Japanese forms and Tibetan forms.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever mix those in retreat practice?
Yeah. But I don't have a particular way that I do it, yes. Sometimes people are doing mantra practice in retreat. If that's what you're asking me, yeah, sometimes they would do that. Sometimes they would just do just shikantaza. Some people, depending on the interaction, might be doing something closer to the Tibetan form of shine, laktung, or mindfulness awareness practice. I no longer teach Tonglen as a formal practice, but if someone insisted on doing it, I certainly wouldn't. If they were used to doing it, I wouldn't say they couldn't. That's sending and receiving while riding the breath, which comes from the Way of the Bodhisattva by Shantideva. There might be other sources for it other than that. Atisha's 7 points of mind training is one of them. Yes.
Sometimes we have people that come and practice for like a week, or they might stay for a couple months,
Yes.
and then they go back home. Is it helpful to go back home and set up forms similar to what's found here?
Yeah, I think they could, and since everyone is so different, everyone is wired differently. Everyone has different kinds of schedules, a different kind of work. I find that people who come here and practice they like this, they want to do this, but they aren't always really successful at going back, setting up their own form. And quite often there aren't places that do whatever it is that they liked about this. There isn't a place that works with forms in the same way we do here, even though this is a Soto temple. So yes, they might set up forms. Have some students of mine are doing that have not even received Jukai and probably never will formally become a Buddhist as formally receiving the Bodhisattva vow, refuge vow, are still doing prostrating before an altar before they sit and saying the triple refuge, even though they haven't done it formally. So some people are doing that. Usually we'll work that out with talking to them about it. Chazon.
When you were talking about forms, you said don't assume what the forms are for.
Mm-hmm.
What are the forms for?
The forms are so that there is something there that has some kind of density to it, so that one can understand what the awareness is about. It's not about believing or disbelieving in anything. It's about awareness practice. Buddhism is about becoming aware, becoming more and more aware of what this is and what that is. And anything we can do to enhance that or support, strengthen that, then I'm very interested in it.
What's the difference between the chanting forms and the form of sitting?
Well, there are differences, of course. On the other hand, we're still watching something move. We're still observing something that's in motion. It could be our voice, it can be the Doan's voice, it can be someone standing behind us who is chanting, and they're not exactly in the same rhythm. We might be aware of that. We might be aware of a siren down the street along with chanting. We might notice how if we're out in the hallway and we're not included in the chants, they sound much different than if we're in here actually doing them. Awareness. If you're sitting down holding very still and you've done this a lot, you realize that it's never the same. You never can repeat. Even though you're here, you're doing exactly the same thing, or as you can tell, day after day after day after day. It's never the same. Everything is discontinuous. Everything is impermanent. And that impermanence is, when we start to realize it, is really powerful, because what you eventually see is that who you thought you were does not last. If you try to perpetuate who you are with some kind of a little conversation you have with yourself, like, well, I'm the kind of person who does this, or, well, I've always done this, I've always done always a little chatter going around to keep some kind of identity happening, or stability, so-called stability to the identity. So following forms is, especially if it's a form you've done hundreds and hundreds of times, you could speak to that since you've done a few that way, you eventually begin to see that you never can really repeat that. And also, by way of incorrect or correct, you never can really do it right or completely correct. There's always something off, something that's too fast, too slow, too smooth, too rough, too. But then there's something that doesn't do anything, and of course that's the witness aspect of that, which tends to get stronger.
Is study also watching what moves?
Watching the mind, watching our own mind, watching our mind move in regard to someone else's thought process coming and going, watching what happens, observing what happens, so that we can fundamentally see what is fundamentally true ourselves, rather than just have a set of concepts that we believe in. Like, well, I'm a Gelugpa, I'm a Kagyu, I'm a Zen, I'm a Soto Zen, I'm a Rinzai Zen, on and on. More?
If all of those forms are watching something that's moving, is it necessary to do all of them?
No.
So why do all of them?
Who said do all of them?
You
What did I say?
study and do the forms and meditate.
What else am I going to tell you? Just do part of them. Don't do the sutras. Just meditate. Keep coming.
I guess you said don't do all of them just now?
I did?
Yes.
So what's the question? Sincerely, what's this? I'm just playing with you. What's the question?
I guess I'm confused.
You're a monk. Okay, ask me the question again. Ask me again that question.
If all of the forms, sitting meditation, studying the Dharma with a group, and practicing the forms, the Doshi and the Doan forms, if all of those are different ways of watching what moves,
Yes.
is it important to do all of them?
What did I say?
No.
Okay. Not important.
And why not?
Well, I don't want to get too much into a story here, but sometimes certain forms are more important for you than other forms, which might be more important for someone else. So I think it's very important to start out with it. Just as like the way I teach, the way I taught when I was trained in 1978 was sit down, watch the sit down, hold this posture, resting the mind, sit cross-legged, have the eyes open, the gaze down. We weren't facing a wall in those days. And when thoughts arise, label thinking and return to the breath. Thoughts arise, label thinking, return to the breath. That's what I taught, because that's what I was taught. So that's what I was teaching based on this is what I was taught. And so now I give instruction, which instead of getting that instruction, I give the instruction of sit down, hold very still, and watch what moves. And if that's the breath, it's the breath. If it's a thought patterns, it's a thought pattern. So it's going to be different with each person. And if someone were to come back and say, I can't, I'm having trouble with this, I can't, this is just too much, I can't, my mind is going haywire, or whatever may happen, then I might modify that for that particular person. I might say, okay, don't do this, do this, close your eyes for a while. Or I might, there's lots of other things we could be doing. Depends on what's happening with them. I might have them do mantra, might have them start them doing white Tara practice. And so, maybe that's the part that was confusing. I'm saying that every form is here, and if you come here, you should do all the forms. But some of them may start to change based on, it's a very, it's so very individual, I think, and this is something that in traditional Buddhism down through the centuries has been missed. Because a teaching person would have to teach 1,000. The Buddha had to teach thousands and thousands of people. He couldn't teach individually. He had to teach with lots of people all at once. I mean, that's how it looks to me. I don't know what, I wasn't there, obviously, but I think this way is to work with someone where they're at. Like some teachers will actually tell you, you should receive Jukai. You should take the Bodhisattva vow. It's time. Or it's time for you to do this, or now it's time for you to become fully ordained. There are teachers that do that. I don't do that. It's not like I'm right. They shouldn't do that. They should do whatever they feel like they should do. So we can go back to your question if you're still, maybe I'm unclear about what you're asking. That might be what actually is happening.
Could you just meditate, or just study, or just practice the forms?
Probably not if you're here. You're going to have to follow the forms. If you came here as a practice resident, like we have an ad in what is it in Tricycle? Tricycle, and we have an ad there that if someone wants to come and do retreat practice, they can apply. Make an application. We'll take a look at it. They could be a student of anybody. They could be practicing, they could be brand new. And then there would be a tuition that they would have to pay. They could come here and live here for a month or 2 months or 3 months or 6 weeks or something. We would look at that. But if they came, they would have to start by, for one, being a student of mind, at least for the time they were here, and they would have to comply. They would have to follow these forms, agree to follow these forms. And then as they went along, we might modify, but we would do it. We might have a person doing more of this and less of that, so it could change. Generally, it's not for that length of time. For a short period of time, it would be 6.5 hours of sitting. I think when Gyokudo was here for 2 months, Gyokudo from Minneapolis, who may even be watching.
She is.
Huh?
She has a question.
She has a question. So, she was here, and other than maybe a couple of hours, she's pretty much sat 6.5 hours. As I recall, isn't that what you saw too, more or less? Yeah. Of course, she didn't have a job, so she's here and she followed that protocol. So I would say, to begin with, all of the ones that we have here probably should be observed or followed and so on, but then that could possibly change. Just like if a person has a job, they can't do it. If they have to earn enough money to pay tuition and so on. So I feel like I might be missing your point. Am I missing it, or?
I don't know.
Well, let's do it this way, from the point of view of, let me help with that if I may. From the point of view of an awareness practice where one is trying to awaken to who they are, to their true nature, to their Buddha nature, to their awakened nature, to their completely sane nature that is completely present all the time, to awaken to that, it's probably going to be necessary to do all of those forms some. If a person came to me and was, depending on what was happening with them, if somebody had been sitting for a year or two or a couple of years, I might actually tell them they need to start doing another kind of practice. I might start them doing mantra practice. Having done a lot of that practice myself and having done a lot of sitting practice. So I just think that the sitting practice is a good place to start to help someone see what is necessary to do. You and I have talked about different practices that we're going to, when we finish the top floor here, which is going to be a Kagyu shrine room. Yes?
Watching something that moves while you're studying with a group and watching something that moves while you're sitting in meditation, are you working with different parts of your awareness, or is it all just sharpening awareness?
I think you could say both. I could say that you could say that there are different parts of it, different things arise. Sometimes you can get irritated with someone else's way of talking about the teachings, or like sometimes people, because they have an understanding, they begin to talk about how they see it, and we have that feeling that they're trying to teach us. We can feel this kind of a self-centered quality that's kind of, we're getting a bigger dose of that than we are getting their wonderful understanding of the teachings. Whereas another person, we really want to hear. We like the way they elaborate on something, the way they take something that they've just heard and say it or paraphrase it in a different way that's fundamentally helpful. So that kind of thing arising, there could be some version of that happening, sitting on the cushion with one's own mind, or with recalling that as you're sitting in sitting meditation, and you're sitting and not much is happening, and then those kind of thought patterns start to arise, which I say, when you're off the cushion, then you can do some contemplation. You don't have to just observe. You can mix it up. The idea is to actually talk, think, process, watch what's happening, see that everything is dependently arisen, but not maintain some kind of a post-meditation state or protocol. Whereas on the cushion, I think it's important to hold very still and watch what's moving. Seems to take a long time to get that kind of training to be more natural. Yes?
Gyokudo's question
Yes.
from Minneapolis.
Gyokudo.
Do people ever fail at solitary retreat and have to leave it?
Leaving solitary retreat is not failure. It's leaving solitary retreat. Failure is extra. The leaving solitary retreat is not failure. I've known people, not recently, but in the past, that have gone into a month-long solitary retreat and slept through the whole thing and didn't meditate at all. That was their retreat. Not failure. It's not failure. That kind of thinking is not helpful. It's not helpful to go into winning and losing and success and failure. This doesn't mean that everybody should. Well, if that's the case, then I'm just going to go into a solitary retreat and just kind of play video games or be on my computer. So it needs to be a genuine kind of thing where you're going in with the idea of going into retreat. You're going into an ego fasting. You're not getting any feedback from anything. It's kind of they're fasting for the ego to go in and just not have much input. Strict solitary retreats are very difficult in some ways and kind of luxurious in other ways. You don't have anything to think about. You've taken care of everything. So for 10 days, 2 weeks, a month, all you have to do is go to the bathroom, take a shower, fix breakfast, wash dishes, and sit. And go to sleep at night. Maybe read a little bit. Very, very simple. And so that simplification helps us see more clearly the way in which we keep confusing ourselves or insisting on certain things about ourselves. It's very powerful. I highly recommend it, especially if you have a strong daily practice. You know, saying like an hour a day or more. If that's very strong, then going into an extended solitary retreat practice is good. But the group practice is also, it's not just because there's a group situation doesn't mean that it's not quite as good or powerful as the solitary. It could be more so. Yes?
That actually leads into Bailey's question from Grand Rapids. She asks, does one form of retreat more so than the other lead to a deeper awareness?
I think there again, it's just dependent on the combination, the causes and conditions that arise as each individual, each person has their own karma, their own everything from the way you were raised to the way, how long you've been practicing to the way your practice has gone so far to all the other things that are happening. Not to mention all the chemical things that are happening with each person. I think both kinds are valuable in their own time.
Sometimes it's hard to schedule a retreat, or it's an idea and we think we should do it.
Mm-hmm.
How do you recommend we approach that?
Plan it a year ahead. Unless you're my age, and then you better plan it a couple weeks ahead. But plan it ahead. Say, is that a planet? Plan it ahead?
Zeus.
Yeah, Zeus?
Planet Zeus, yeah.
Planet Zeus. So plan, say, okay, don't seem to get around to doing this, so this coming March, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna, and then tell somebody. Tell us. Come and see us. Set it up. Come and plant your feet here. And there's we don't do testimonials. I mean, you know, like, oh, I did a retreat at Sokukoji. It was wonderful. So I attained so many. I now have so many siddhis. I can levitate and I can smell flowers a mile away. Yes, sir.
You were talking about giving direction to your students.
Yes.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like that you do that a whole lot, but this particular topic is one thing that you do give direction. So if you have a student that's stubborn and doesn't necessarily
You're talking about you?
obey direction well,
What about that? That's a good question. If you have a student that
can that person still be a good student? Can they still?
Well, I don't have any bad students. You might have a bad teacher. I don't have bad students. I have students that are maybe some students that are more challenging to me personally than others. And a lot of it just has to do with communication. Sometimes the miscommunication, it can be so intense that you can't do anything about it. Even an apology doesn't work. People are so sure that you're thinking something, doing something, thinking something. So if you just try to have a straightforward statement about something, a whole bunch of things come up about that. It's probably happening with you. You don't think so?
I don't know. Do you think so?
I don't think. You guys are the ones that think. I'm one of those non-thinker guys. Yeah, we all think. Well, you know, some thoughts come and go. The important thing about thoughts is not so much that you don't have them, that they're gone, is that you don't believe them. You have thoughts, please we're human beings, we have thoughts come and thoughts go. But if you don't grasp onto them, attach them, and try to get rid of some, and protect others, life goes much more smoothly for you and those who are in relationship with you. Further questions here from the Zendo? Any questions online? Off in the dissonance. So you have some time. So I very much recommend doing that. And the idea of not being able to get around to it, set a date. Just pick an arbitrary time. I'm going to do the last week of March, and then tell somebody about it, or schedule something. Schedule something here. You can always move it backward and move it forward. You can cancel it altogether. But that's also an awareness practice. It is not failure. To get your mind into success and failure is endlessly circular. And it's just not helpful to be winning and losing. I'm doing pretty good, now I'm not doing so good. I'm doing pretty good. The whole world runs that way. There are people who teach whole seminars on power of positive thinking. I should give a seminar on the power of not thinking. While you think. How do you convey that to someone? How do you say, well, it's thinking, but it's not really thinking? Well, it's awareness, but it's not really awareness. Why am I talking in apparent riddles or contradictory statements? That's how it is. It is extremely contradictory. You look this way, you don't see anybody. You look this way, you don't see anybody. You look this way, you see everybody else. You look this way, you see yourself. Changing constantly. Nothing lasts. Realization, if there is such a thing, does not last. Nothing lasts. That's broken down. That's no thing. Nothing lasts. Well, something must outlast a little bit. Find out what that is. So I'm sorry this has been such a humorless talk. But retreat practice is it humorless? So I highly recommend it. I mean, the daily practice is obviously good, but scheduling some kind of a time in the future and coming, and any of people who are watching this or this video that have never been here, especially if you consider yourself a student of mine, which some do. I don't know how many do and how many don't, but if you do, come here. This is an unusual monastery, an unusual place to come and practice. Very, very strong forms that are not enforced. You enforce your own form. And when I say they're not enforced, obviously, if you set something up and you make an agreement to do something, then the agreement itself that's all the force you need. Yes?
Shane from out in Santa Ana, California.
Yes, Shane.
His question, is it usual to feel extremely crazy after a solitary retreat?
Yes. That's very usual. Especially for you, Shane. No, it's you could feel very crazy before and very crazy after, or it could flip the other way. And sometimes you can do a really long retreat and have it go fairly good, and then have one day of sitting where you just absolutely feel like you're are out of your mind. So it doesn't seem to be very predictable as to what practice is going to do what. The important thing, I think, to remember is just to continue no matter what. That it's that the particular terrain in your path that the particular side of the mountain that you're going up, to use that image of climbing a mountain as the Buddhist path, a path of realization, may have things in it that no one else is going to have. It may have aspects of it that are very challenging and very difficult, that the person right next to you is wondering why you're having so much difficulty. And that's because you're going through probably exactly what you need to go through. The causes and conditions that just got us on this planet at this particular time, in this particular body-mind complex, are unsearchable. You can't Google where you're at, where you're from. You can't say, where did I come from really? Probably won't get an answer, unless there's money in it for somebody. Then you'll get an answer, yes.
Is there any recommended length of time for a solitary retreat? You've thrown out a couple of, a week, 10 days, 2 months.
The first one that I did was 10 days because my teacher, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, actually put me in that retreat. I didn't know that was coming, but he put me in the retreat. And so that 10-day, and that was, that's something that he recommended, was the minimum retreat length of time was 10 days. And I see the value in that, and so therefore I teach that also, based on having done it myself. I mean, it could be, you could do a week, but it would just be a week of meditation. Wouldn't necessarily be, something about going longer than the standard kind of, we all measure things by weeks. Something about pushing that a little bit further into 10 days. That 8th and 9th day are really difficult, because the week is up and you're still sitting there looking at how wonderful you are. So I would say a 10-day solitary retreat is good, and any practice residency, a few days, 8 days, 10 days, 3 days, a month, 2 months, like as Gyokudo did recently, and Meido came from Pennsylvania, from Oan Temple in Oan. She is a monk. She was here and did 3 months. She was here. And her practice was modified based on having a discussion with me about it. We modified that. She didn't do a complete 6.5 hours a day. But we did what she was able to do. Yes?
So what about the extended? You said someone did a month and you've personally done 2 months. So is there, it's hard to say
Length of time is, you could do, as I was saying, you could have one day that was the hardest day you've ever sat all day long, and another 2-week period that was, just moved right along. But you'd have to have lots of experience doing a retreat to have that show up that way. Any other questions before we close on retreat practice? Anything else about the question you had there? So, all forms we should start with all the forms, and then we might shift them around and change some. Quite often people will be selective about the form they like to do. That's why it's necessary to have a teacher. Without a teacher, you'll pick and choose. Well, I really like this meditation. I don't like that one because I don't feel good when I do that. Well, of course you don't feel good when you do that, because that's rubbing right where the ego is constructed. That doesn't feel so good there. I think I'll go over to this other kind of retreat. And I know it sounds like I'm mocking people, and if you need help here, I am. People, I just feel so much more peaceful when I close my eyes. Yeah, of course you do. I do too. It's called sleep. But we don't live there. We can't live with our eyes open. So it's necessary to meditate from this old man's point of view, to with the eyes open the eyes, because this is how we live. You don't live like this. You live like this. It seems to be necessary to strengthen the awareness through all of the sense fields, including the eyes, the mind, and so on. Or do something else. Go to the mall. Yes, Tammy.
I just was wondering, when you go, I know you guys go to the prisons sometimes.
We sometimes go to prisons. Yeah.
Have you ever worked with people who, not when they're in solitary confinement, they wouldn't be able to go to services or whatever, but that have spent a lot of time in the solitary
Yes.
confinement, do you
Yeah.
have them meditate or while they're in there, or?
Well, I
mean,
don't have any say-so about what they're doing, but if somebody is going in the hole, which is what they call it in the Michigan Department of Corrections, I don't even have to tell them. I have one fellow, I don't know where he's at right now, I don't know if he's out or what, but he actually wanted to be in solitary
Yeah,
because it was quieter. And also he was left alone and he could practice. But this fellow practiced sitting meditation, and he was also doing some mantra practice. He was doing it in Tibetan forms. So yes, he wanted to be there. He preferred that area. But someone who's in there who doesn't have a practice to do, this could be very difficult. Could be more, like they say, sometimes they say solitary. Some of the people have been in solitary for decades and decades. This is a kind of torture. But with a form, then you could make use of it, because then you could use that solitary form to strengthen your awareness and see more clearly. So it could have its advantages. But you pretty much have to have a teacher, someone help you with that, because pretty difficult to just decide to meditate. You have to have someone help you with it usually. Any other questions? Very good, thank you.
We'll dedicate the merit in the back of your handbooks. Also, remind everybody about our donations. We just recently had a former client who is very grateful from AFR who just sent us $10. So every little bit helps us, even after you may not be in this area anymore.
May the earth penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jiho san shi shivu shi son gu sa moko sa the 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita.
O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, its buildings, garden, and all adjoining areas from any and all dark or negative energy. Remove and dissolve any negative energy or devices. Fill everything and everyone with light. Please shield and protect with light our teachers, monks, students, and all practitioners of the Dharma, our families and friends from negative forces and energy from now on. Help us to realize the truth of the Buddha's teachings.